Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell on Thursday, January 24th, 2013. We're beyond Thunderdome. We are post-apocalypse here with news and views from the Nefarium. And interesting news and views. Uh, you'll recall I've been talking a lot and blogging a lot about Germany and its call to repatriate its gold. And I argued recently that Germany would not have done this if it wasn't being quietly backed by even more powerful players like Russia and possibly China. Well, there is a bit of a signal that that guess, that speculation may be true. And I'm going to link to this talk an article that appeared just yesterday on RT. Pardon me, folks, I've been suffering a sinus again. RT posts an article called Central Banking with Other People's Gold, a 368 billion dollar treasure trove in lower Manhattan. And this is an op-ed piece by Michel Chossudovsky for RT Today, Russia Today. And I want to read this to you. I'll link it here on the YouTube site along with a video by Max Keiser that I also want to talk about. But first, let's talk about this article. And I want to read just a few things. Quote, according to the New York Fed, there are, in 2012, approximately 530,000 gold bars with a combined weight of 6,700 metric tons stashed away in the Fed's lower Manhattan vaults. These are official figures which are impossible to verify. All right, now, that's part number one. RT is picking up on what I've been suggesting, and it's kind of reinforcing this, that the amounts of gold that are said to be in existence are doctored numbers. They're obfuscated numbers. We don't know how much the Bank of France or the Bank of England or the New York Fed or the Bank of Italy or even for that matter the Vatican Bank have in terms of their gold reserves, because they won't tell us. It could be a lot more than they're admitting, or it could be a lot less. But I've been arguing that this fact alone is one of the reasons now for the breakdown of trust in the central banking system, because the figures are so badly obfuscated. And I maintain adamantly that this whole breakdown is also tied to the bearer bond scandals. This is what no financial analyst, as far as I'm aware, is willing to talk about, that whole scandal is coming to light precisely because it is a hidden system of finance that has come home to roost, and it's now out in the open. And as I wrote in Covert Wars and Breakaway Civilizations, that was created as a covert operations slush fund in the wake of World War II to bring down the Soviet Union, international communism, and to fund black projects research. Now let me go on with the RT article. Quote, the gold is in safekeeping on behalf of more than 60 sovereign countries and a few organizations. Close to 98% of the gold bullion stored at the New York Fed's lower Manhattan vaults, according to the Fed, belong to central banks of foreign countries. The remaining 2% is owned by the United States and international organizations such as the IMF. So do the math there. 2% of 5,700 tons of metric gold, according to this article. That's not a lot. In fact, the figure that this article gives for the amount of Germany's gold at the New York Fed exceeds that of the United States. So that's another clue that we're watching the collapse of something taking place. And again, I submit part of it is that hidden system of finance. I'll get back to that. Germany's central bank owns a total of 3,400 tons of gold. According to recent reports, a staggering 69% of its gold bullion bars, namely 2,346 tons, are currently held at the New York Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, and the Banque de France. Two other European countries, namely Italy and the Netherlands, and we've already seen the Netherlands is quietly beginning to discuss the idea of repatriating their gold, so Italy won't be far behind, have significant undisclosed gold bullion reserves held in custody in the vaults of the New York Federal Reserve Bank. There are no immediate plans to repatriate this bullion. Now, here come the clinchers in this article by Mr. Chossudovsky. Quote, foreign countries around the world were pressured after World War II into depositing their gold reserves not within the vaults of their own central banks, but in that of the world's foremost imperialist power. Okay? And let me continue. America's unipolar world hinges on sustaining the U.S. dollar as a global reserve currency. There it is. U.S. hegemony in monetary matters is supported by the custody in the USA of gold bullion reserves on behalf of more than 100 countries. So in other words, stop and consider what Mr. Chossudovsky has just said there, because I've been saying it too, namely that the backing of the American dollar is the American military. In other words, the economy now is so fused to the military-industrial complex, it is a permanent war economy, all right? And part of that, in turn, was based on this vast system of fraud that is now coming to light, and that's the reason for the collapse of trust, all right? So you're seeing here, I think, a lot of things happen concurrently and at the same time. Now, let me finish one more thing from this article. National sovereignty requires the repatriation of the gold bullion deposited in custody with the New York Fed. Let me read that one more time. National sovereignty requires the repatriation of the gold bullion deposited in custody with the New York Fed. Now stop and consider that with that unipolar world and global hegemony statement earlier. What RT is saying through the mouthpiece of Mr. Chossudovsky, but remember, RT is an official Russian government news agency. What they are saying, in other words, is now we are seeing a global hegemonic imperialist power that has backed that hegemony by the U.S. dollar and by keeping other countries' gold reserves in custody for them. And that means they're suggesting, they're hinting very strongly, that that gold was used as leverage by the Federal Reserve to create vast amounts of funding. And it was also an implicit threat against the national sovereignty of the countries whose gold it was holding. So in other words, what they're also suggesting is any move by any nation to repatriate its gold is a reassertion of national sovereignty against that hegemonic power. Now, one final statement that RT states here. The leverage and collateral in all monetary transactions largely accrues to the New York Federal Reserve Bank rather than to the owners of the bullion deposited in custody. True. That gold was used to leverage a huge financial system, much of it hidden. Follow the example of Germany and repatriate your gold, unquote. Now that is a sweeping statement. And just recently, Max Keiser, and I'll link that on RT-TV, came out with a short episode in which he and others are saying that Germany's act to repatriate its gold is, in fact, a kind of implicit declaration of war. It is a kind of implicit declaration of a currency war. Germany, in other words, this is, again, my friends, I can't stress how huge this is. Germany is a major economic power. It is still a very powerful military power. But it would not have done this in so direct a manner if, number one, the trust in the Anglo-American central banks and prime banks and the brokerage houses behind all of that, dealing in all of these securities, had not gone to an all-time low. And number two, part of the reason for that, I contend, are the bearer bond scandals and what they imply that the New York Federal Reserve in particular was doing with all that gold. All right. They drew the conclusion that that gold was being used to create securities, which in turn caused an influx of liquid cash into the United States Treasury for securities that could be denounced later as fraudulent by the Americans if it needed to do so. That has created a huge global covert operations, black projects war machine. So in other words, they are also, by asserting national sovereignty, they are objecting to the direction, and they are questioning whether or not they want to live under, for all intents and purposes, an American dictatorship of the world. So in other words, Germany wouldn't be doing this, I submit once again, without some other major powers backing. And with this RT article, I submit to you that perhaps we found where some of that backing is coming from. And rest assured, if Russia's behind Germany in this respect, so's China. So the situation is going to get very interesting. Max Keiser, I think, and the people that he interviews in the link I'll put on this News and Views are absolutely correct. This is the beginning of something. So we're in the midst now of a currency war in the guise of calls for repatriation, but that's not what it's about. What it's really about is pointing out by these nations the connection between this huge leveraged system of finance, which is now absolutely astronomical and off the charts. All of those derivatives, all of that leverage that was created since the end of World War II, that can buy you an awful lot of covert ops. And I submit to you something else, it can buy you an awful lot of black projects and other things. This system is now being challenged, all right? I don't expect that it's going to result immediately in hot war, but I do think the Keiser interviewers are correct. Inevitably, it's going to involve something. It's going to involve some sort of showdown. As one person put it on Max Keiser, or it was Max Keiser himself, I believe, the United States is being gradually maneuvered to where it is going to have to start hunting the bigger game. In other words, enough of this picking on Libya or Syria or countries like that. There are now much bigger players on the stage, and they will be much more difficult to pick off. I don't expect that they're going to try anything like this with Germany, because of course that you know what the result of that would be, particularly if Russia and China are backing the German decision in this regard. So I think this is going to spill over into consequences. We're going to see increasing factionalism within the European Union. It may not be an outright crack-up of the EU just yet, but we're going to see increasing factionalism. Eastern Europe and Germany will gradually come more and more under the dominance of Germany and Russia. And the rest of Europe, France, Spain, and so on, they may end up going to a completely different arrangement. Italy is the key here, depending on where they want to go in terms of that realignment within the European Union. I suspect that Italy is going to end up in the Eastern Europe, German, and Russian side of this issue. So we're watching tremendous things happen, folks. Keep your eyes glued to this story. It's not over yet. The Fed, of course, as you know, is now trying to delay the repatriation of Germany's gold, so the game is afoot. They're coming up with all sorts of excuses. One final comment, somebody has already pointed this out, a friend of mine in Germany and some others, that the French incursion into Mali may be, in fact, to gain control of gold fields, to get the gold to get to Germany. So, you know, that may have been a case of Germany holding a gun to someone's head and saying, all right, go get our gold. So, I'm not trying to make light of a situation, the tragedy and human suffering involved, but the behind-the-scenes geopolitics of this is going to keep getting more and more interesting. A final thing that this signals, this gold repatriation, is I think you need to see the Sandy Hook disaster and the gun clampdown, or attempted gun clampdown in this country in this context, because I've said for many years that those who think that the elite are in control of everything and manipulating all of this and sitting back and saying how wonderfully accurate and detailed and conniving their plans are, that this is not true. I've been maintaining for years, particularly on the Byte Show, that the Western Anglo-American financial elite has been in kind of a panic mode since the beginning of the financial breakdown, and actually probably since 9/11 for reasons I won't get into here. And that therefore they are not going to do anything to jeopardize their one secure base of power, which is in North America. I think you have to see these recent domestic moves in this wider international context, because they know they are extremely unpopular, both in Canada and in the United States as well. So, in other words, they are looking at a world that's out to get them. And, so, yeah, they're in a little irrational panic mode. All right. So anyway, folks, that's my rambling news and views for Thursday, January 24th, in the post-apocalypse beyond Thunderdome year of 2013. Take care, everybody. God bless, and we'll see you on the flip side.